Okay, I'm hitting record, and I totally did not record when I did the bio.
That's okay, because this is about you.
Yeah.
So thank you everybody so much for joining us. As you know, we have Snow in Vietnam, which is written by Amy. We've read this. It's amazing. I'm sure you all are reading it. You'll know it's amazing as well. And this week we're going to be going over chapters 13 through 16, is it?
Yeah.
Yes. And we have some questions for you.
Oh, goodness.
So Min Huang doesn't know in chapter 13 if his brother is dead or alive, yet he has to go about his daily life. And he feels it's right to show honor and commitment to his country, but loves and worries about his brother. He helps Snow by intercepting her from northern officials when he himself could get into trouble for doing so. He has expectations from his superiors, but also has to remain true to himself. Snow trusts him, though logic would tell her not to. He's a communist, yet he seems to care. And there's just one common thread that ties the two of them together, and that's Mrs. Tran. So as you guys are reading this, when you read about the in-depth complexity of the conflicts facing the individuals impacted by this war-torn country, what stood out to you the most?
That's a good question.
Well, I think for me, one of the things was that everything isn't exactly as you might see it on the cover. You know, I mean, you've got to know people. I mean, I don't know, like the North and the South, and the connections that you have through family and friends, their connections may be different than you. So where, you know, it kind of muddies the water sometimes, I guess, as to where, what path you follow, or how you trust, or how you figure out who you can trust. And to me, part of it is just, you know, trusting some people, even though on the cover other people might not. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
And is that?
Well,
I don't
think anything is black and white, right? There's
that's what I was trying to say.
I know. Very good.
Why did you say it, Dee? Nothing is black and white, and I think in wartime we may be different people, right? Circumstances will throw us into a situation where we may be different than what we normally are in normal, healthy times.
I think it would be hard for a South Vietnamese to trust someone from the North, and especially at that time. And knowing what I've heard from other refugees who were escaped like Amy did, neighbor was telling neighbor on each other. And they had to, when they wanted to worship, if they were the Catholic, they had to meet up in a little room above their house and in small numbers, and were afraid that their neighbors might see the people coming in and report them. So she was taking a risk when she did that.
Yeah.
But she had to know a little bit more, and that's the reason she approached it with caution.
Yeah, I agree. And it was either him, a familiar face, who was also the son of Mrs. Tran, or those Northerners who were burning down the villagers. And, you know, I mean, the lesser of two evils, maybe.
Right.
Plus, she didn't seek him out. She turned around and boom, he was just there. She didn't look for him. She just was presented with, suddenly there he is.
Yeah, over almost a year and a half later, after they had eventually met, there he was.
Complicated. Very complicated.
Very complicated.
complicated. And, you know, I can't help but think about when you're in a situation where you have uncertainty, no matter, you know, there weren't a lot of certainties that people could hold on to. And so everything had this level of risk to it. Like, you know, you were saying, Mary, neighbor versus neighbor, you didn't know who you could trust. And just like you were saying, Dee, like you couldn't really judge a book by its cover, just too much unknown. Amy, for you, Min Huang, in a sense, was one of the bad guys in the book. As you developed his character, you chose to humanize him and show his soft side. Can you tell us about your decision to portray his character in this way?
That's a twofold question. One was to keep you guys guessing. You know, is he good? Is he bad? You know, it makes more of a page turner, I would think, until you get to the end and you figure out, and you make your own decisions, really. But, you know, through my research and through talking to different veterans who served for the North and the South and the US and the refugees, it's like, at the end of the day, we're all human. And when I went back to Vietnam, I realized that a lot of that was in the past for the countrymen and women. And as long as you don't bring up the actual war itself and talk about the conflict, people lived in peace in Vietnam, you know, and so you can definitely see the human side of things. I stayed in a house during my visit there in an was it B&B? Airbnb, sorry. I stayed in one of those houses, and the host was someone who fought for the North. And, you know, that was one of the things where I had to kind of skirt around a little bit and not be too touchy on certain topics. But at the end of the day, like, he's such a nice guy, you know, and like all of us, we want to be loved. We want peace. We want to contribute, make a living. And so when I wrote Min Huang, I wanted to make him amoral, like Mrs. Tran, but I also wanted to make him someone that people can relate to and help us move forward to put the past behind and the war behind us. So, yeah.
I think you did a really excellent job with that. You know, like it's really stood out to us, you know, that here are people who could have every reason told to them about why the other person might be a bad person, but both were everything that you just said, human, trying to do what they thought they needed to do to survive and have a way. Anything else anybody wants to add to that? Additional thoughts?
I think what her mother did was like what we should do when we meet new people is to accept them as the way they are and think the best of them. And then as you become to know them a little bit better, you can kind of judge whether they're really a good person or whether they're bad. And I think that's what she was trying to do in that situation.
I think part of her survival depended on it too. You know, she had to take that risk and just kind of throw caution to the wind a little bit. You know, I always tell Preston, don't give me a reason to not trust you. Until then, you have the benefit of the doubt. You know, my son, Preston, I was just like, and so far, luckily, he hasn't done anything to make me not trust him.
I love that.
I think you're able to portray that the Vietnamese people were loving, caring, peaceful people before this and during this and after this. So I think you were able to portray that in the book.
Thank you.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in the beginning, like, we all wanted the same thing. You know, we wanted peace. We want the foreigners out of the country. We fought for reunification. It's just that with Ho Chi Minh, you know, his approach on government and how things should be ran was not everything that we wanted him to, you know, and so it turned into a horrible situation for a lot of the people who stayed behind. But in the beginning, we were all hopeful and we thought peace was at hand. So
yeah.
you'll believe anything you want to believe if, you know, if that's what you want.
True.
Now, chapter 14, this one, you know, person, there's a lot of emphasis on Mrs. Tran. And, you know, she was such a character in the book. And I think a lot of people kind of fell in love with her character.
Yeah, I did.
And, yeah. You know, from her backside to, you know, whatever, you know, mood she might have been in, be it soft or kind of prickly.
Yeah, prickly.
Yeah, she was a great character. At her funeral, Snow, Min Wong, and is it Kwong?
Gung.
Gung speak about Mrs. Tran being a wood tiger, and they speak fondly of the qualities she holds because of this. They call her independent, courageous, confident, fierce, short-tempered, but also note that she has these incredible leadership capabilities. And Gung goes on to tell Snow and Min Huang how he only met her once, but she scared him a bit. Min Wang humorously replies, "Try being her son." And for the moment, these three unlikely friends bond over the life of Mrs. Tran. And so, you know, there's so many things that come from just that one paragraph. But as you are writing and you're pointing out that she's a wood tiger, can you explain to me what the weight and significance of the title associated with your birth year means?
So there are 12 zodiac signs, right? And tiger is one of them. But there's also 5 elements. And those elements depend on the month that you were born. And there's, let's see, wood, I think it's fire, water, earth. Can't remember the last one, but
air.
Is it air? Who said that? Man, are you making stuff up? I don't know. I don't remember what the 5th one was. Shoot. Homework for you all. Anyways, so when I was thinking about this, I decided to make Mrs. Tran born the same month and zodiac year as me, because that's what I understood. So I'm a wood tiger as well, although Mrs. Tran was, you know, probably several generations ahead of me at the time. So, but yeah, that's the importance of that character is or that zodiac and that title is to help you understand a little bit about the author, but also a little bit about just Mrs. Tran, right? I mean, she's a character, serious, obviously, but I guess, you know, it's kind of fun to throw yourself into the book somehow. You always have friends that say, "Hey, can I be in your book?" And then you write a character and then you're like, "Okay, but I'm going to kill you off if you know." I always joke around. I'm like, "I'm going to kill you off if you don't do what I ask you to do," or whatever. But yeah, it's so hard to come up with characters sometimes, you know, and so I think every author puts a little bit of themselves into the book.
So, you know, Mrs. Tran was such a strong character. And that's a challenge, I think, as an author in writing such strong characters that they can hijack the story. So I think it was inevitable that Mrs. Tran had to die.
Yes. Yes. You know, it's like you lash onto her and then yeah, she had to go. And when I wrote this, I wept because you know how I tell you that I wake up at 3 a.m. or whatever, and I hear these voices in my head. And when I wrote Mrs. Tran and knowing that she was going to die of overdosing on the malaria pills, I just wept and cried because I got attached to her, because in my mind, she was a little bit of everybody that I knew, a little bit of me, a little bit of my mom, a little bit of Sister Six, you know, some of the strong women that have come into my life. And she was kind of the person that I wanted to be, because she represented survival, you know, and perseverance and grit. So yeah, when I had to kill her off, it's just like, my husband was like, "Why are you crying?" I was like, "Mrs. Tran died." I know, it's funny how we get so attached to these characters.
You do.
But to us readers, we know her for a few chapters, but as the author and the writer, you knew her for a long time as a character in this book, besides the people in real life that you knew her as, in a sense.
That's a good point. And I created that character because I needed someone to kind of slap Snow around and wake her up a little bit. And you know, there's when you're writing, you have to have a character arc. You know, your protagonist and your antagonist, they have to have some kind of development from the beginning of the book to the end of the book. And I knew my mom was a strong person, but I also knew that she wasn't always that way. And so who or what was going to happen to her to make her to go from that point A to point B? And Mrs. Tran was what came into my mind. You know, while my book is based on a true story and there are a lot of elements that are true, I also didn't have every piece. And so there had to be bridges, and those characters were the bridges, including the doctor and his seamstress wife, you know, in the Morphine, not Morphine, but anyways, they're introduced later. But yeah, they're also bridge characters as well.
Was there any part of you, you know, as you're putting these qualities into Mrs. Tran, and she's going to be one of those people who, as you put it, slap Snow into kind of moving forward and being brave. Was that just filling in some of those pieces that you didn't know, or was there also any component of, oh gosh, if I was there, I would have told her this?
She was totally made up, and I just let the characters take me wherever they're going to take me. You know, I've mentioned this before. I'm the pantser type of writer. I make shit up. And so I fully admit that Mrs. Tran is not a real person and I made her up. But yeah. And interestingly enough, she was one of my favorite characters too, even though she wasn't real, you know. I don't know if that answered the question, but
I had a question, Amy, about the backyard tomb. Is that something that's common in Vietnam for people to actually do that?
Yes. And Larry might even know this, but you know, we don't go to cemeteries, and most people don't cremate in Vietnam either. And so, because of filial piety and ancestor worship and that kind of thing, we always try to keep our family members close. A lot of people live out in the rural areas and they have land at their disposal. And so it wasn't uncommon for burials to take place, you know, on your property or not too far from your property. And they're always raised. Usually there's no underground burials.
Yeah.
The first time I went to Vietnam, it was amazing because, like Oklahoma, the dirt there is so red, and I would see just mounds and hills of red dirt. And then you would see sprinkles of tombs and crypts and that kind of thing, which is pretty haunting because they're usually white or blue, interestingly. And there'd be, now this is after the war, of course, so there'd be like just miles and miles of these tombs. And it was eerie, but it was also beautiful because you see these splatters of blues and white, you know, and you know that somebody got buried and somebody is resting in peace. And hopefully they actually have names to identify who they are. But there's also many people who didn't get that kind of honorable burial, you know.
Yeah, I agree with you, Amy. We went from Way to Da Nang by highway when I was in service, and as we were going, had come down the mountain, the Hai Vong Pass towards Da Nang. As we were driving along the flat area, all you saw was these little raised crypts, and in yellow and white and blue, all dotting the highway, the behind houses, and it wasn't like there was a one major cemetery. It was a lot of crypts scattered all over the side of the highways.
Yep. And I had wondered, like, does somebody own that land, or how did that take, get buried there? I have no idea. But to answer DJ's question, it's very common for families to bury their own members in the backyard so that you can turn around and have lunch and dinner and celebrate birthdays and death anniversaries or whatever, any special holidays, and with them through offerings of food and burning incense and prayer and that kind of thing.
Any other questions?
Well, I don't remember if it says, but what are they made of? I mean, it's elevated, it's above.
Just cement, stone.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was envisioning, but I was like, man, is that right? I don't know. Okay.
It's interesting.
Y'all need to take a Vietnam trip with me.
I'm down.
That would be a very interesting trip. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's do it, guys. I've been back 4 times and I keep saying this is the last time. This is the last time. And now I'm like, I want to go back.
Oh.
By the way, I looked up the zodiac thing that you were talking about. The elements are
elements.
Yeah, they're fire, water, earth, wood, and metal.
Metal. Okay, not air. Metal. Got it.
It's a good guess.
It's a good guess.
All right, so here's another here's another question or point. Snow has a very humorous cooking scene with Min Huang. I thought it was humorous. Where she tried for 45 minutes to open a coconut. I found that scene very funny. Because I can relate, and I think we all can relate. He wanted her and knew she needed to learn how to cook. And when someone tells us something, you need to do this and we know that they're right, they have this kind of power over us and we don't like it, but we know they're right. So I just thought it was very humorous that she's pounding this coconut and it says her thighs are bruised and she's sweating. And I could just feel, it's humorous, but at the same time, I could feel her frustration for her pounding this coconut, swearing under her breath, wanting to chuck it at his head. Yeah. And when you talk about humanizing Min Huang in that scene, he was not a communist. He was a sweet man helping her.
Yeah.
And she was making her do something that was frustrating, and it was humorous, but it was for her own good. And now, she knows how to open a coconut.
Of course, he adds the icing on the cake by saying you'll never starve if you can open a coconut.
Foreshadowing. That was a foreshadow. Total foreshadowing.
How did you all feel that this scene changed, or what did this scene do in your mind to Snow's relationship with Min Huang? Because she wondered, can I trust him? And now they have this wonderful scene together. How did you feel after reading the scene with them in it?
I think we should pick on Stacy.
Stacy?
Well, I thought that, as has been said, that really humanized him. And it just, the whole scene just, to me, just really spoke to both of their characters, not as North and South or, communist or just the people that they were. And they were able to connect on that human level over food and the shared task of cooking and trying to reach that goal of opening that coconut so they could have it with the meal and that sort of thing. So I really enjoyed that scene as well.
Mm-hmm.
Would any of you have thrown the coconut at his head?
Probably not at his head, but I probably would have chunked it on the ground and see if that would break it open.
I would have thrown it at him and probably pretend to miss. Yeah, when I wrote that scene, I kind of had my friend Chalamet in mind. She's like one of the best coconut tree climbers in Guam.
Who
and
is?
My friend Chalamet.
Oh, really?
She and I used to work at T-Mobile and Microsoft, and we were roommates for a short period of time. But she would tell me her stories about climbing the coconut tree, and I was when I wrote that scene, I was so curious. I was like, how does one climb a coconut tree? So I must have watched several videos, YouTube videos, and then I watched videos of people trying to, open up the coconut. And so that was my inspiration. I was like, okay, this is how you open a coconut. But yeah, I would be frustrated too. And, she's not used to doing anything domesticated. And here's this freaking, soldier who comes home and doesn't know her from anybody. And she owes no allegiance to him. And he's making her do all this stuff. So yeah, I would have thrown that coconut.
It was a little bit interesting that she kept trying though, right? I mean, she kept trying. I thought that was interesting. It's like she didn't after the first or second time just say, eh.
Yeah.
And she really,
yeah.
And I thought,
I think that's
that
pride. Stubborn pride.
Yeah.
I think that was part of the
perseverance. I'm sorry.
I think that was part of the reason why she kept not being able to leave. She had to learn something first. Because even if she left the country with a young baby, how is she going to care for herself? You know what I mean? So it seems like every time she didn't make it out, she learned something new.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
That's true.
Yeah.
Almost like she wasn't ready to go yet.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
And I thought that showed another aspect of her perseverance and how that is how she was able to survive and make it to America. And that scene really brought that out.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah. So, I mean, that, it's funny because when you said, can you do these few chapters? And we're reading over them and we're like, oh my gosh, there's so much meat in every single paragraph that you wrote. And
I know it's hard to.
It was so hard
so
to
many
decide.
questions.
But back to that dinner scene, during dinner, Min Wong is talking about his mother raising him to be strong and resilient. And he goes on to say that Lopsided, his brother, was weak and that he received too much love. And Snow challenges this thought and tells him, receiving love does not make you weak. Love is stronger than hate. And, love is strong, but it can be so easy to tell ourselves that it's not stronger than hate. And Min Wong touches on this because he pushes back and says, but war's been going on for this long and war's been going on, for that long. And if there's so much love, then why so much hate and why so much war? How do you think this conversation adds to the softer side of Min Wong's character?
That's a panel question, right?
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. I have no idea.
I think it gives a little more insight to who he is and and his perception of things. Because I think in the beginning he was so quiet, you didn't quite really know what he was thinking, what he was all about. So I think that's what I love about this whole seeing in this whole chapter is that we get to kind of go inside and figure him out a little bit more and hear, a little bit more about him and how he thinks.
Absolutely.
Well, I think all he knew was the war. He was in that war for so long. And that's what he sees and that's what he believes, and history has proven to us that love doesn't conquer all, because at the end of the day, man is selfish. They want to conquer, they want the ports, they want, the rice patties and all that. And so at the end of the day, it's not about love and hate, it's about control and power.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's such a relatable thought that carries through the text, because that is the constant influx of balance that comes through so many things, which is we have love and love is great, but hate creates so much trauma and chaos, and
it's a battle.
Yeah. So you did a really, really nice job bringing that into a human character. It's very realistic. Anybody else have any thoughts about that? No. Okay. So as Snow coordinates peddling medication supplies with, why can I never get this name right? Wrong. She says, I recognize now that I do not have control of anything. And for this reason, I feel prepared for everything. That's a really big statement. So for the group, what do you think is going on here emotionally behind this statement?
Well, I will say that, her escape plans have been thwarted a few times, but ultimately it kind of works out for her in one way or another. And so there's a trust there, that things will work out and that God's overlooking her life. And I feel like you have to just kind of have a plan A, B, C, D, E, because nothing is, guaranteed. And so I think part of that is also her little naivete coming out, where she's always been kind of just floating by, a dreamer, and things just kind of worked out for her. There's always someone there to take care of her, and she can rely on her looks and her beauty and to get by. And so maybe that's why she said that statement.
She has a lot of different powerful statements, or all the characters do. There's a lot of really deep, powerful statements that they all make that say so many different things. So very dynamic.
Do you think part of the reason she said that is because she has, to go along with what you said, she's made plans, but since none of them have worked so far, she's realized she's lost control and maybe has no control at all. And so she's prepared because she's now thinking, no matter what happens, I'm ready. Is that part of it?
So I don't know if you all know, but previous to my writing career, I was a senior executive assistant, working for C-level and board of directors. And that's the one thing that I definitely learned out of that experience is you just can't plan as much as you want to plan. There are so many anomalies, and those executives, they make plans on the fly sometimes, and you just got to be able to go with the flow and have a team around you that understands that when they say jump, you got to already know how high you're jumping, and you're on 24/7. I've had experiences where I'm like in Germany and I've got this trajectory plan that I've got. And then I get into a car with the CFO and the CEO, and he's like, well, what are we doing for the, this board member? And next thing you know, you're like trying to find a drone for this person in Germany. So it's, I think that part of my background is throwing that in there. It's like, you just got to figure things out.
And also perhaps, the ever worsening climate, it seems like with every chapter, things are unraveling a little bit more with the system, things are getting more, and then we'll see like in the next chapter, things are really getting worse. And so she's having to just get tougher and stronger and smarter in order to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that character arc again.
So in chapter 15, Snow takes a bus from Ho Chi Minh City to Vinh Binh, and it takes her 8 hours. There's the stench of shrimp, unbathed people, smelly feet, bumpy roads. And in all of these conditions, this is just what she has to do. There's not really a choice per se. Survival requires pushing through, as you're just saying, there's these different steps, this different level of learning. But in the midst of all of this, she's trying to keep her baby alive. And she goes to this doctor's office, if you want to call it a doctor's office. And the doctor doesn't even have a stethoscope to listen to her baby's heart. I mean, I just think, what would you do if you went to a doctor's office to bring your child there and they're like, oh, sorry, we don't have a stethoscope, but we think this might be going on. How is that for you as a reader, thinking about, gosh, this is probably very much a reality for many, many, many people who were going through what Snow was going through in Vietnam during that time.
So wasn't the doctor the same guy that tried to help her escape?
The taxi peddler?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I'm surprised with all the trading and selling off of, American supplies that somewhere along the line, he didn't get a stethoscope or, some of the things that he needed.
Well, I will say that there's a lot of stealing going on. There's a lot of just getting rid of your resources, to make ends meet. And at that time, when people were leaving the country, they were flocking in hundreds of thousands of numbers, and you had all the doctors leaving. You had, military leaving. You had anybody who could leave would leave. And so whoever stayed behind at that time, there weren't a lot of doctors and lawyers and, it was just the country bumpkins, the folks that just couldn't make it out. They had no ties, no connections, no way to make a living. And so, yeah, medicine and apparatuses like, stethoscopes were hard to come by at that time.
And like for, I don't know whose parents or who isn't a parent, but, I guess like as a reader and you're thinking about, gosh, my baby, in that condition, if you could even just say like in one word, what was the reaction you felt when you read that scene?
Kind of holding your breath, really.
Yeah.
Amy, I had a question for you that I thought was kind of interesting. I remember reading there about like when she gets on the bus and there's a statement about she sits on the same side of the bus as the driver because you're less likely to get noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. So I just wondered was that anything that happened in real life or?
No, that didn't happen in real life, but it just came from my personal experience in terms of human nature generally, that we tend to, if you're a teacher in a classroom or if you're in a bus, whatever, people tend to scan left to right. and the bus drivers in Vietnam sat on the same side as our bus drivers here in the United States, you know, and so that was just something that I kind of threw in from my imagination to try to be a little bit more strategic about, you know, how do I get her through these checkpoints and how do I get her home safely without getting asked or stopped or questioned. So yeah, purely.
It was easier to disappear that way,
yeah.
huh?
Yeah.
On the bus.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from anybody about that scene or anything around then?
The Vietnamese are superstitious, and they believe in ghosts because their country has been ravaged by war for centuries. Are there any points in the story, this is for readers, are there any points in the story where you felt the characters' actions were based on this belief?
I think Mrs. Tran's son trying to help Snow is based on that, because he didn't want his mom to come back and haunt him after he had promised to help her. So I think that for sure is based on that.
I remember when Snow was speaking with her family, I think it was when she was speaking with her family, and they were upset at her, or maybe she was speaking with Gong, that she said he's afraid because his mother can still come back and haunt him, so he's going to do what's right to help me. I can't remember who she said that to. Sorry, Amy.
Yeah, she was talking to Min Huang about that and saying, hey, you know, your mom can still come back and whip you. My mom, my aunt, they've all told stories, and all those ghost stories that are in the book are stories that they have told me. One about, you know, the lady who was buried with other men, and you could hear her voice, you know, crying at night until they dug her up and then gave her her own burial space. Then the crying stopped. There's also a scene where, you know, my mom she tells about how she was in school and she got pushed off of her hammock and there were like slippers everywhere. That was a story that my aunt told me. So there's a lot of ghost stories in Vietnam, and they all believe that. And we definitely believe that, you know, our family can come back to change our lives and affect us.
So in the end of that chapter, Snow's reminiscing a lot about the past, and she thinks back about her childhood, and she references her university days, and she says, I was young and happy living in my bubble. Boy, can't we all relate to that statement. We all long for something, simpler times, moments with our loved ones, and these feelings often surface when there is loss, but Snow's lost almost everything. Sam, her husband, life as she knew it, safety, certainty, and her entire country. In the previous, like when we talk about Snow's statement previously about, I recognize now that I do not have control over anything and feel prepared for everything. Do you think that this loss is part of what made Snow so strong to protect what she had left, the most important thing, you?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's probably maybe the one thing that she feels she can still what control and influence. You know, she's responsible for this child. And she's going to do whatever it takes, right? Even if it means befriending a communist, you know, soldier, or trading and risking getting caught and being put in jail or a re-education camp of some sort. And I think, you know, as parents or as mothers, we know what it's like to fight for our family. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
And I think probably because the family is one of the most important things to the Vietnamese people, is that they're more inclined to fight for their family more than fighting for their friends. Mm. And that is one of the things that was so sad about the country being divided and at war, is because you have family fighting family. Mm-hmm. And families losing history because of the fighting.
Yeah. Blood truly is thicker in our neck of the woods there in Vietnam. And, even when I came to the States, like my cousin Tree and I, money is never something that we talk about. If I call him and I said, I need $10,000 for, put a down payment on my house, no problem. And same thing, he just lost his job and he needs some money to do whatever, no problem. And it's something that we don't think about, okay, oh, you owe me this amount of money and you need to pay me back by this amount. It's just something we freely give because you're just giving it to yourself. This is my family member, my brother, whatever. And at the end of the day, that's going to come back to me in one form or another. It doesn't have to be in a monetary form. It could be him just coming out to help me put a roof on my house, whatever. But family is super important, and we don't talk about money and keep score on things, and I wish more and more of us were more like that. I think life would be a little bit more peaceful that way. But yeah, in America anyway, I feel like we're very much an independent society. What's mine is mine. What's yours is yours. There's the property line. And yeah, but not in Vietnam.
That's why I always wanted to find out where Wonder Woman's island is. But I'll settle for Wakanda now.
Wakanda forever.
Right? For sure.
Yes. Love it.
Anything else from chapter 15 that anybody wants to know or ask?
I thought this line was really good, very powerful. Only those we trust do we show our true self.
Mm.
Good line, Amy.
Thank you. Yeah, that was when
that
was when the seamstress was constantly winking.
Yes.
And she was pretending to have this, medical issue, whatever. And it was just to kind of feel Snow out, right? And see if they can trust her or not. But when she openly says, hey, let's go into business together. I will give you the medical supplies. You figure out how to get me out of here. I think that's when they were like, okay, we can drop the facade and let's do this kind of thing.
So,
well, the fact that at that point, they were saying we gave ourselves these infirmities because they don't consider us really whole or worthy of wanting to include. Mm-hmm. So the limp and the tetany of her eyes, like perfect. It's like, oh, well, there's somebody standing over here that doesn't limp. We'll go there. Yeah. They develop that protection for themselves.
Yeah, nobody pays attention to the rejects, right, of society. They're just
yeah, that's cool.
They're a burden,
right?
So in chapter 16, Snow comes home after this big long bus trip, and she comes home to her father, Jason Dirty Butt, with hunger in his eyes and a cleaver in his hands. The family's screaming, the food is gone, the fruit trees have been picked clean. I mean, just in reality, show of hands, would you have eaten the chicken? Would you have? Okay.
Yeah.
How dare you?
It's just like my chicken. But in writing, this scene, Amy, and, this beloved chicken, and, he's your pet, and he's that one other, he's part of your family in a sense, in this well, he's part of your mom's family in this book, in this setting. And when you came back, one of the things that had spared the chicken's life was that you happened to have this food that was given you to be able to come and go freely. Now, did that just happen as it played out? As you said, you're a pantser when you write, or did you go back and say, I have to have a way to save the chicken?
Total pantser. I was just like, oh, we'll just play, make it up as we go along. I actually fell in love with Mong Yo. That's how you pronounce it, Mong Yo, Mong Du, as some people call him. But I fell in love with that chicken, and I didn't want him to go yet. I knew at the end there was going to be a demise for him, as usually that's the case. But yeah, I wanted to hold on to Mong Yo just a little bit longer, and I used that the dried foods as the scapegoat. And then I was like, okay, well, now what I'm going to do? How am I going to get Snow back and forth between, and I was like, oh, well, Sister Six will just preserve something, yeah.
Over to work.
Yep.
Well, one last question. I know we're coming close to the hour. That went by really quickly. So Sister Six tells Snow towards the end of the chapter, you're adaptable, and this skill will serve you well when you leave this communist hell we are in. What did you, as the readers, admire most about Snow's strength and her adaptability?
Well, let me ask you this. If it was Sister Six escaping the country, do you think she would get very far, being that she's a pretty rigid person?
Well, I'll just say that the vision I keep getting, and this is just like a metaphor, but it's like I just keep picturing Snow and you in this raft, and the raft has a slow leak, and she sees a log drifting by, so she jumps on the log. Then the log starts to sink. Then she finds a whatever. She's just willing to take risk after risk after risk, and she just finds a way. And to me, I think, in my daily life, there are decisions I'm like, oh my gosh, what should I do? And I'm like, geez, suck it up. This is, nothing compared to, literally from one life risking situation to the next, and just willing to do what it takes. That's in a lot of ways, it's like, you need to be willing to do what it takes, Steve, with whatever. That's what I took away. It's just like, man, if you had to go to a fight, you'd want Snow on your side.
Although that being said, I'd probably want Sister Six on my side as well.
And Tran.
And I think
instinctively, we instinctively as humans, we survive. That's what we do. We have to survive, whatever it takes, and hope and pray. Part of that is just praying that what we want is also in alignment with what God has planned for us.
I think her determination was that no matter what happened, she was going to get out of Vietnam to get her daughter to a doctor that could help keep her family going.
Yeah.
And I think that she was determined, and she wouldn't let anything come between her before she did that.
Yeah. Well, she lost her husband and she lost Sam, she'll be damned if she's going to lose Dolly as well, I think. And she ends up losing Mong Yo too, her only friend. Anything else, guys? We're wrapping up now, and it's been a whole hour.
That went by fast.
It did. Those were really amazing questions. And, we're going to miss next week because of Mother's Day. But the following Sunday, if there's any questions that are still on your list that we don't cover, we can certainly cover those as well that following week. But thank you so much for coming, for reading my books. And I hope you have a great weekend next week when we are not together. I'm going to miss you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, now I got to find something to do.
You can reach snow in Seattle next.
Right? Maybe that's what I'll do.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, all right, my friends, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and end this thing, and it'll be on YouTube later tonight.
Awesome.
Thank you, Amy.
Have a great week.
Discussion.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.